Hello again. This is Bob Dennis speaking with my friend Aaron Coffey, and he tells me he's had some insights in the last week or two, and he wants to share them with us. But I think first we want to talk a little bit about what we're not doing. We're not giving medical advice, right?
Yep, we're definitely not. And I do get emails from some of the viewers, some people from Dr. Dennis's forum that I'm also a part of. And I do appreciate getting emails, and I respond as often as I'm able. Sometimes it takes me a while to get to them. I made a comment in one of the previous videos, probably not in the video itself, but in the comments field. I put my Proton Mail email address, and I'm fine giving that out to people. But I had a lot of people saying basically, some maybe well-intended, some others maybe less well-intended, basically just saying, hey, tell me what you know. I want to integrate this into what I do professionally, which I'm not a professional speaker. I'm not a professional physician. I'm not a physician at all. And so, as I've said before, I'm like everybody else. I'm just a person that's dealt with health issues, some more than others, some less than others. And these are just things that I've picked up along the way. However, I do not feel comfortable personally training people how to use techniques that I've picked up along the way, that especially ones that they intend to kind of reverse engineer it and add it to their own practice. I'm fine with them doing that and helping patients and, increasing their practice. It just isn't going to come from me. I can make a recommendation of who I saw if that person's comfortable with me sharing it. Like say, it's not because they're doing anything, but I don't want them to suddenly get bombarded with 5,000 emails about how do I use this to benefit myself. And if it's truly to benefit other people, it's just hard to tell via an email if this person's sincere, if they're a crook. And you know more about that than I do.
Unfortunately, I do, Aaron, and I get emails all the time. In fact, as recently as 5 minutes before we started, I got an email from somebody who was proposing the same kind of thing. I get 2 or 3 a day, it seems like, where people are, wanting to. Did I tell you about the hair regrowth?
No,
For a while, I was getting these offers to just transform my product into a male baldness hair regrowth product, and I would get these emails from people saying, "Oh, I have a great idea, but you need to sign an NDA. I've got this great idea. It's a secret, but you need to sign that it's my idea and I own it. You can't do it." And I would be like, "I don't do that. I'll talk to you later." Click, and they'd call back and they email, just barrage me, and finally I'd say, I have integrity. You either believe it or you don't. You tell me your idea. And then towards the end, after I have gotten now 31 of these, towards the end, I'd say, and if it involves hair growth or regrowth, I'm not interested. And they'd go, no, seriously, this is a huge thing. And they would tell me that it was really low integrity people. That entire industry is very low integrity. I had one guy tell me, look, it doesn't even matter if it works. It just needs to look good. And then he offered to fly me and my wife down to a new $100 million offshore medical treatment facility he had for men's health, which was basically, it was in Cancun. And he had this huge facility that they had invested in. And it was basically bringing men down and doing hair treatments on them. And just really low integrity people. So there's lots of those. And there's lots of trolls for other types of PEMF who are constantly contacting us, because we can see a lot of, my advice being built into other products and stuff like that. So we get a lot of pretty low integrity contacts. But on the other hand, I get thousands of contacts, as you're getting many now. I get thousands of contacts from legitimate people who are just really quite desperate for some help. And their physicians not taking them seriously anymore. Oftentimes their families not taking them very seriously. What do they do, right? And the problem is that I am not a physician. I'm not an alternative physician. I'm not a mainstream physician. I'm a scientist.
Mm-hmm.
And my whole take on this technology that we're discussing is that I developed it for NASA for basic research. And then I modified it and have researched and developed it for my own chronic orthopedic pain. And that's what I know something about. And every other application of it, that does not relate to chronic orthopedic, like physical pain, somewhere in, is something I really don't know about. I really haven't studied it much. But the thing is that I just try to put the device out there so people can responsibly experiment with it the same way you might experiment with an exercise or something else.
Or a computer.
That's what I'm doing.
All the many different ways you could use it, kind of thing.
Right. And so in your case, we're really talking about, okay, here's a person who has very thoughtfully and carefully done some self-experiments that has really helped you, and you just want to help tell people about it. And that's where we're coming from on this.
Yeah, that's definitely the case. And with the acupressure that I mentioned in the previous video, most people have heard of acupressure at this point in the world, Western and Eastern. Basically, a lot of you have said, well, what's your secret? Well, I did have the acupressure done. And like I said, I can make a recommendation about that. I'll probably just talk to the person. If he's okay, I'll put his contact info. If you're okay with it, I'll just mention that so they don't have to contact us directly. But this person's really busy. He's an actual doctor, chiropractor, he's a friend of mine. And I mean, he's basically traveling, probably as busy as you are. He's busy traveling, and within his profession, he's treating people all day long. When I knew him, he was busy, and that was 7 years ago. And he's busier than I've ever seen him now. And so I don't think he's going to have time to respond to these large emails that I'm getting either. I think it's basically, if you want help, you can go see him. And that's basically all. I mean, I've got 2 friends who are physicians, and I told them about it, and they were super skeptical, because it's like, if you're a Western trained physician and you're told, hey, go have this acupressure done, it's gonna fix your allergies. And I had it done. They were just like, no, I don't believe you. And I said, no, seriously. And then what actually convinced, I think, both of them to do it was I said, hey, this is micropulse. Let me show you how this works. And so for one person, it's the guy I mentioned in earlier videos. He had that bad knee, and his knee's a lot better now. And so for him, it's like, all right, well, he at least knows what he's talking about micropulse, so maybe I can try this other thing out. He's visited that other doctor now 3 times. He probably drives about 3 or 4 hours to go see him. And this man's like 70 years old, and guy's got 2 PhDs. He's been around the block. He's been part of medical community, the established medical community, for over 40 years, and the scientific community. But yet there were no, there was no help to be found for the condition that he had, which is frankly just a regular disease that's out there. But the West is not very good at root cause management.
Well, actually, I'd like to mention a little thing on the side here. The most sort of sad people that I talk to are medical doctors, and like a very typical trajectory. I've probably talked to 40, maybe 40, 35, 40, 50 medical doctors who've gone down this track where they will say to, their spouse, oh, well, you're having pain. Well, just, rest and take these meds and do, the standard Western, traditional mainstream medicine. Right. And then what they do, and I know because many of these orthopedic surgeons and physicians are, rehab physicians are colleagues of mine. Mm-hmm. And in fact, one of them was a student of mine. He's since gotten an MD and a PhD, and he's got his own practice, but at first you bring people down the standard track, and the standard track is for pain is kind of a dead end. You can quite easily go all the way to the end. You've exhausted all mainstream medical options. It doesn't work, and which is usually the case because pain is just this thing we don't really have control of. We don't really understand. So we can block it, but it's sort of blocking a pain signal is sort of like, I think you and I talked about this. It's sort of like putting earplugs in when you hear a fire alarm, right? Yeah. It's like not a good idea, right? So the interesting and the sad thing is that I know many medical doctors whose like family relationships and their marriage can be damaged by the fact that they're so bought into the system. It's like, well, I have the power to heal. I'm a medical doctor. So if they just take my advice, take some tramadol and rest. And I've spoken to physicians and their spouses, and the physician will accuse family members. Well, you're not complying. You're not doing what I'm saying. That's why you're not getting better. Right. And oftentimes this causes a lot of stress because they might be complying exactly with what he's saying. And of course, as we know, it doesn't work, right? And then the sad thing is then they get sick or they get in pain or something's wrong with them. And then they take their own advice and they discover that it doesn't work, and they can be hyper compliant. I mean, I know doctors who were taking medication on a stopwatch, exactly to the second and doing exactly what was recommended. And of course, it basically doesn't work. And just if you follow the mainstream advice, pain tends to get worse and worse over time because you're not treating the cause of these idiopathic pains. You're simply blocking the signal. It's like putting earplugs in when you hear a fire alarm. Okay, maybe it's a test, but maybe it's a real fire, right? You need to know. So you need to pay attention to it and put it out at the source if it's real. So the deal is that these people are really sad, and you can feel it in their voice because it's like their entire sense of self and their entire worldview, and sometimes their family and everything, relationships have been destroyed by their unswerving belief in a medical practice that doesn't work. It just doesn't work for pain. I've been told many times by physicians, well, you need to comply, you need to do this, you need to do that to make your pain go away. And you do that. You do it religiously and you do it all the time and it doesn't work. And then they just say, well, you're non-compliant, and then they sort of fire you as a patient, and there you're shot out the end of the mainstream medical system. But when this happens to doctors because they're humans, right? They're not superhuman. They don't have the power to heal anything as long as anybody still follows their instructions. That's not what modern medicine is. And when they get caught in their own vicious cycle, it is so sad. Because I've talked to dozens of them like this.
They're the stick with the program people, and then the program just doesn't, it can't do everything. It does great with emergency medicine. I think that's probably the chief.
If you get shot or you get in a car wreck, you want to go straight to a mainstream, trauma one hospital. But
they're good at patching you up for the immediate problems, but they're just really, I would say it's an obsolete or a relatively antiquated worldview about pain and about the cause of disease. Like they're really good about some things, but then they go all out master campaign, about issues. And when you actually dig down the research, it's like, oh, there's not nearly as much research to support this. It's just that they don't know what to do and they need to do something because people are going to be afraid if they don't do anything.
That's right. So in the mainstream, you can have one or two papers supporting something that's considered okay by the mainstream. And, my physician and all kinds of physicians everywhere will say, well, it's been proven by a scientific paper, which, by the way, scientific papers don't prove things. It's what they compare average values and assign a probability that they are the same or they're different. And if there's a 95% chance that the average value of two groups is different, then that's called statistical significance. That's what scientific papers generally do. They don't prove something. They don't optimize something. So when when you see this happen, as I've seen it happen, they'll get one paper or something and they'll fixate on it. But then you can take 1,000 papers. There's about 1,000 papers for PEMF, and they just discount them as nothing, right? I mean, they just literally do a 180 psychologically. They just shut it off. And this is the problem with mainstream medicine now in the West, is that it's not self-correcting. When confronted with overwhelming data, they very often just rationalize it away.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me, and I always use this paradigm for other things too. So people who know me have probably heard this description before, but it kind of reminds me of kind of air transportation versus ground transportation over 100 years ago. Just the amount of skeptics that it could ever happen, the amount of attempts to do it that did really miserably. And then when someone does it, I would have loved to have been part of the journalistic group that traveled around and wrote newspaper articles about manpower, like human flight, like the Wright brothers or things of that example. Like go to the Far East or go somewhere in the Middle East at that time when the person first took off and spread the good news, so to speak, about what has happened. And the vast majority of people will blatantly think you're nuts. I mean, they just simply won't believe you. Even when they see it, I think they'll be really gripped, but they'll want to test it and study it more. And then it's finally, you come to that moment where it's like, wow, that's undeniable. You really did fly.
Well, I think this is what's going to happen with PEMF, because I started off as a skeptic, as you know. I was way too skeptical. I was like, well, no, this can't work. This is, I'm channeling my 1890s, barber surgeon going, balderdash, harumph, nonsense. This can't possibly work. And if you look at the data, if you just look at the data and you look at the overwhelming volume of it and the diversity of it, there's no question that PEMF works. But basically, this is all that Aaron and I are saying, is that you've done experiments in your own way.
Yeah.
I've done experiments in my own way, and this is our opinion.
Yeah, and,
right?
and it's kind of like, basically, could it be said that at the most basic level, we're talking about, and this might be a stretch, but it's kind of like radio waves for people that can't grasp electromagnetism. It's essentially therapeutic radio waves on a different band.
I think that's correct. I think that's correct, because what radio waves do is they interact with an antenna, and they cause electrons to move in that antenna, and then there's an amplifier. There's an amplifier attached to that antenna, and it can actually be made so it's sensitive to a certain type of vibration, certain frequency, and then actually amplify that, and then transform the signal into something else useful, a radio signal of some kind or whatever. And I think that what's going on in the body is that PEMF causes the movement of ionic species in and around cells, and your cells are sensitive to the movement of ions. It's that simple. I don't think it's any more complex than that. I think it's wonderfully subtle and nuanced and not well understood at all. But at the 50,000-foot view,
yeah,
changing electromagnetic fields cause ions to move, and they put forces on charged species, and that's just physics. I mean, and we know biology. We know many cases where biology is sensitive to this. We just haven't figured out exactly what that transduction mechanism is for PEMF. So I think that it's my belief that once the effect of PEMF is shown biophysically in a model that's easily replicated and can be easily replicated from lab to lab, all of a sudden PEMF will go the route of like hygiene, or the germ theory of disease. It will go from nothing to everybody's on it, because in my opinion, PEMF is the other half of medicine. It's you've got the chemical influences causing chemical changes around a cell, and then you've got the electromagnetic influences causing ionic changes in a cell. I think it's the other half of interventional medicine.
And I think that's, as a non-scientist, just as maybe a well-read person in the East and the Western fields, it seems like that's definitely true. And I've also read that even with the Eastern claims, I would say that most of the Eastern claims are that the body has an innate ability through the pressure points on the different surfaces of the body to sort of massage and direct the body's own very minimal but legitimately existing energies. I mean, that's a really wacky way to say it, but basically I think the argument is there's a way in which people can direct or increase, kind of like opening a gate system. If you were doing like a waterways system, like shut this gate, open this gate, it allows passage of water and so forth. And kind of like if you're going through a canal, like the Panama Canal or something like that. Mm-hmm. I think that's basically what people in the East and people in the middle between East and West, I think that's basically what the best of them are claiming. But then the technological innovations with like micropulse and other PEMF just in the theory world, I think that together it would really be a fascinating experiment. That's why I've done a little bit of using micropulse on the pressure points that I learned from having the allergy thing done.
I think it's cool to combine and do these kinds of experiments. So I was thinking, maybe you could show people exactly what you were telling me about earlier. You could explain it to them if you want.
I got a couple things. If I could wrap up the allergy thing real quick. Obviously this is unplanned and unrehearsed, but because that's how we roll anyway.
That's right.
But basically, so I can't show people how to do the treatment itself because, like I said, I'm not a physician. But there were pressure points that we did after the treatment that you can do anytime that just help with different types of symptoms. They've worked for me. They've worked for other people. They may not work for everyone because it actually depends on what issue you're actually experiencing or struggling with at that time. And there's a lot of theory about if different times of the day associate with different organs of the body in Chinese medicine. So it could be 3 a.m. is the lung meridian for the Chinese medicine system. So I read, and I've experienced this, if you wake up at 3 a.m., it may be that something you've eaten in that time frame has just caused your body to have an energy, either too much or too little energy in the body. And I'm not, like I said, I'm no expert in Chinese medicine. I've just read about it and then tried to correlate that with my own experiences of what I've had in my body or what other people that I know are saying. I have a friend who his wife wakes up every single day at 3 a.m. And it may be, you know, a coincidence, but it's strange that she only wakes up at 3 a.m. She doesn't wake up any other time of the day, but always at 3 a.m. And so if I look at the Chinese medicine calendar, 3 a.m. is related to lung issues, and these people have a lot of allergies. And so, you know, who knows if it would be that or not. I'm not making the claim. I don't know. But I do know, just for people, I'll throw a bone out there, if you will. I learned that if you were to massage this pressure point, it can really help with eye irritation, stuff like that. This one right here in this part of your arm, it's going to be kind of hard to see on me, but my elbow is right there. So with my wrist, if you massage this area, it can really help with eye irritation as well, especially if it's like pollen or smoke or something like that. So what I would typically do, what I began doing was, hey, you know, I had this done 7 years ago. I remembered the pressure point. So I was like, well, what if I put my micropulse, my coils, you don't even have to double stack. That's just how I have it at the moment. I was like, well, what if I put that right here and just hold it right there? Well, my goodness, I actually felt in my body different than the acupressure, because that was really subtle. It was like, if acupressure could be described as, using their own theories, if it could be described as removing an obstacle in the flow of a river, then this would be like using a fire hydrant to inject more flow into that location, into that terminal, if you will. So I kind of felt it like that. So another one that I read about and also experienced was this one. You could call this fight and you could call this flight. And if you get angry, it's not that it gets rid of your anger. I don't think anyone makes that actual claim. It's just that you have the physiological experience of fast heart rate, you know, flushed head, you know, you feel angry even when you're no longer angry. Some people feel it for like an hour or two later, like you're still feeling the effects of having been angry. Well, I noticed, like, if I put micropulse, a coil right here, especially if I pressed on it like they would with the acupressure, in addition to holding the unit on there, I literally, within about maybe 30 seconds, all of the physiological feelings of the anger, even if I'd had it, you know, 15 minutes ago, completely gone. It was like it flushed it all out of my system. On this side, if I was fearful and I had really had like a moment of dread, or I'd freaked out about something, maybe I saw, you know, I don't really care about bugs, but I'm trying to, if I was walking down the path and some animal or some critter startled me, and then I'll have this physiological reaction, you know, I've already processed, okay, it's harmless, it's over there, whatever. But if I did this and pressed and held for about maybe 30 seconds to a minute, the physiological symptoms of fear and all that goes with it, the fight or flight, the cortisol, it would just all vanish. It was just vaporized. It was just totally gone.
Well, that's interesting. And that's the kind of thing that a person, I think, could very safely self-experiment with. In fact, I'm going to try it with a micropulse. You know, you could, you know, or any other, you know, type of you know, pressure point combination sort of therapy. Could be a different type of PEMF, whatever you want. But I mean, I happen to have micropulse, so that's what I would use. And just you know, you could make observations on how you respond to it. You know, I think it'd be a very interesting study.
It's safe and easy, and a lot of the acupressure people call it the gate points. So you can read about gate points online. You can go to Google image search and search for traditional Chinese medicine gate points. What you're going to find is, with most of them, it's right here.
Yeah, that I know of.
Yeah, and it's this spot right here. Let me take this jacket off and I'll show you what it should look like. Probably it's going to be right here on this part of your arm. So in that area, and I think, you know, with the acupressure,
both arms or just one arm?
Both. So it's actually, you're going to start here on this part. This is the first one on the right hand. So I'm in a video, it's reversed for y'all. But you start with the right hand, and then you do this point right here. Then you do this point, and then you go to the opposite side and go back down. This one, and then this one. And then it's kind of hard to describe this, but because I can't show you my feet, but if you were on the inside of your leg, so if I made this my foot, if you're on the inside of your leg, 4 fingers above the ball of your ankle. So if you kind of cross your legs and look down at your legs, so your legs just crossed, you see the ball of your ankle in front of you, and you just lay a hand out right next to the ball of your ankle. So you're kind of like on the side of your leg, and you're 4 fingers away from the ball of your ankle. That's a pressure point. That's part of the traditional Chinese medicine gate points. And I'll probably try to post a link to a picture where you could find it. But there's also a pressure point in between your big toe. So basically that corresponds to your hand, but on your big toe. And then on the other big toe, and then back to that spot 4 fingers above the ball of the ankle. And then you close the loop with this spot on your fingers. So I had the allergy that I had done. You would basically you would hold the allergen. It didn't have to be like the allergy vials that some people have, but you could really. I've gotten accused of being Rain Man before because I would go into a grocery store, or I would walk out into the yard and I would collect like spice jars, and I would go around and I would collect the pollen pistils and the stems and anything that was related to that specific species, like ragweed, or just
Right.
I would literally go out sometimes and I would swab the pollen that had accumulated on my car, because I realized my air intake on my car had probably sucked up more allergens than I could probably gather on my own. So I would just take small samples off of that, and then I would take it to the allergy doctor, and they would do the acupressure while I was holding the object. And they say that it's in the palms of your hands, the soles of your feet, and under your tongue, sublingually. Those are the areas that they have the most sensory nodes, if you will.
And you got real relief from that, right?
Oh, it was incredible. Like, here, let's just put it in perspective. I was an extreme skeptic, but I was desperate to be well. And I really couldn't eat a lot of food back in 2012 and before that, when I was a kid too. I mean, pretty much, definitely high school, college, all throughout grad school, I was really, really sick. And in 2012, I was probably in my late 20s, and I was just reading everything in sight to try to find some sort of relief. You know, if this medicine would work. I didn't really find any medicine that would work, because it was more like supplements. If this supplement would work, if this diet would work, this probiotic would work. And they worked for a while, but they never really worked long term. And so I really wanted to get rid of my allergies, because it wasn't like a full-blown allergic reaction in the sense of, nose and eye and whatever. It was just like food sensitivity's gone crazy. And so when I read about this, I actually read Dr. Jacob Teitelbaum's book, Fatigue to Fantastic, and I was following a lot of the steps. And he's an integrative doctor, so he's an MD. He was a patient that basically made himself well. He claims to have found the cure for fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue, because he was one and doesn't have it anymore. And he was so sick that he was homeless on a bench at one point in his life.
Oh, wow.
And this is a guy who's, I believe his roots were Holocaust victim. He's had the whole experience of life.
Yeah, evidently.
Really, really stressful ones. And, but basically in his story, he described that he married one of these acupressure doctors, and he was a real skeptic in the beginning, but he said that this lady, who wasn't his wife at the time, basically just challenged him, "Hey, come to my clinic, come to my practice, and I'll get rid of your hay fever in one visit." He thought it would be easy to disprove it, so he showed up, kind of as a Western doctor that's a know-it-all, like a lot of
like
people.
I showed up to NASA and like, come on, I'm going to show you guys this doesn't work, right? Oops.
Prove it to me, yeah, and then I'll go out and say, this is quackery. Well, they went, and according to his story, it was like someone turned the nozzle and the faucet turned off, and he no longer had sinusitis after that. So I think later the story goes they got married, and she practiced her practice, he practiced his, and then kind of integrated each of their others to each other. And so I really never met him, but I really am indebted to learning about ribose from him, and then learning about the allergy thing. And so I had it done, and it was the strangest thing. After 3 visits, my lactose intolerance was completely gone.
Wow.
And within a year, I would get just probably ridiculous about it, but I was so excited about it. So when I got treated for pollen, I would go roll around in the yard, and I didn't get itchy. And then I didn't have any reaction at all. And then I worked in a building that had pretty old air ducts. Like, it was like 60, 70-year-old building. So I would get like some Q-tips, my best friend at the time, and I would swab the moldy air vents not like dangerous mold, but just like stuff's going to cause a reaction to people who are mildly sensitive. I would bring the samples into my acupressure doctor. They would do the acupressure on me. The next day I'd go back to work, had no reaction at all. And everyone else was still blowing their nose. So I was like, wow, this is as, life-changing in my mind as micropulse. So I was like, well, as time went on and I still remembered the pressure points that would help deal with different symptoms, that's when I was like, let's try this. Because you said in the past, like other doctors were using in their practice to kind of complement the things they're already doing. So I was like, well, I'm not a doctor, but I still remember these 8 or 9 pressure points, and let's just put the device, on my hand and press and hold. And if I'm having kind of an acute sensitivity before I can hop off and have someone that come help me with the actual full-blown treatment, I was like, let's just see if it'll help me. So it really did. So if I went somewhere and I was, if I encountered something that I had never been treated for and I did have a reaction, whether it was a food or a pollen from a plant that I'd never had this treatment done on, I call it, it's just like a mass desensitization level of acupressure. That's simply all it is. That's about as simple as it could be. And I figured that since I know this legitimately is real and it legitimately has some effect on the body, and I know that what I experienced with the acupressure is real and it had some effect on the body, I thought, my goodness, what would happen if I put 2 together? Because that would be just like the best of all possible worlds in my mind, because we don't know whether this truly injects energy into the meridians or if that's just a theory or if it just excites the tissue in that area or what exactly. I mean, nobody's really ever done these types of studies with these 2 types of ideas mixed together, because I don't think that people on either platform know that the other exists. I might be one of the few that do. So yeah, I just experimented, put on the pressure points, and I just noticed that if I massaged it in the way that I was told by them, it would probably take, it would work, but it would take longer. If I use this, you're talking 20, 30 seconds, and your itchy eyes are completely fine. Or, your reaction to an object, it's not permanent. So when I massage these gate points, that's not a treatment. That's not what they or I would have described as a treatment. It just simply helps the symptoms subside until you can actually be desensitized by someone that does this type of medicine.
Yeah. Well, subsiding symptoms can, I think, in itself can help, because you can become trapped in a positive feedback loop where you have a bad symptom which causes an increased reaction, which causes the symptom to get worse. And if you can just break that loop, that can at least make things not get worse.
Yeah, I haven't taken Zyrtec in over 7 years. People are like, you take any allergy medicine? No, I literally don't take any allergy medicine. I'm not on any kind of medication. I never have been. And my wife's not either. She went and had, a whole bunch of blood tests done a couple of years ago, and they said you're at the healthiest of your percentile. And when people see us, they usually think that it's actually kind of funny. We'll go see people that we graduated from high school from, and they look their age, but when they see us, they're like, my goodness, you look younger than when you got married. And yeah, my wife, I don't think most people would want to be able to say this. My wife can't get in her wedding dress from when we got married 10 years ago because she's too thin.
Oh, wow.
Like when people see us, they frequently think that we're 21 or 22. We'll visit a church or we'll go somewhere and people will try to throw us in a college group. And we're like, well, that's nice, but these people were years old when we were born. So.
That's hilarious. Well, I think you're right. I think combining things together, and this is where I think PEMF self-experimentation is so valuable. It's like every time I talk to physicians who really experiment with this, and by physician, I really meant, like a caregiver, yeah, or acupuncturists, chiropractors, nutritional therapists, naturopaths. Every time they tell me, when you combine PEMF with whatever modality they're doing, they generally tell me it's 2 to 3 times as effective. And I've had many of them tell me, well, gee whiz, this is working the way it's supposed to work now. So I think there's certain things, going on in the body that sort of inhibit the ability of their intervention to be helpful. And then if you can kind of knock down those barriers or hold them down, then doing the right thing, whether it's nutritional or whatever, seems to have more benefit.
my dominant theory, as a closing thing on this particular topic, is, and I could be wrong, but it's just everything that I've read about the traditional Chinese medicine, which I think is the overarching worldview of anybody doing acupressure. I think that's like the oldest, most dominant, most widespread theory on the acupuncture meridian system. And it's worldview neutral from what I've noticed. So for people that are thinking that it's shamanism or voodoo or something like that, which I seriously, I have a master's degree in world religions, which most people, I haven't shared that before, but like I'm pretty intuitive at looking at people's worldviews and trying to figure out how much they influence the data that they experience. Are they looking to find solutions for a problem that they already have? Are they looking to follow the data where it actually leads? And with this particular system, with the worldview neutral as much as possible traditional Chinese medicine system that is not woven into Confucianism or Buddhism or has ideas that are not directly related to the scientific component of things. What I think is the case is that in that system, it's a closed loop, that the energy of the body, it ebbs and flows throughout the day, and they were super complicated. So certain times of the day, you'd have the most energy, certain times of the day, you'd have the least amount of energy. It's usually the opposite side of the coin. So if you have the most energy at a certain time of the day in the morning, then you have the weakest in the other time of the day. So I looked at it and I said, okay, they're masters of learning the body, the systems of the body and so forth. But what if you had a deficiency of energy in your body? You were so messed up that your body couldn't break down enough nutrients to increase the energy in your body or to have enough energy to fight the bad guys in your body. You'd be in a really bad situation. So what I have a theory of is that I think that this generally through induction somehow amplifies the energy in the body so that it does everything better and faster. It basically is like absorbing the energy from the device, the batteries.
I think it could do that. On the other hand, my scientific worldview bias is that there are several mechanisms that could be going on here. One of them is that it could be doing something actively, right? Like you're saying, charging things, and we can charge things inductively. I personally don't think that it's doing things in the way that many people say it's doing in cells, but that's possible. I could be wrong. I've been wrong. The other possibility is that it's inhibiting something else that's allowing the process that you want to work. So it's, by inhibiting inflammation, it might be allowing some other process to be much more effective, or just simply facilitating movement of ions and diffusion and cross-membrane transport and stuff like that. So I think there's a lot of mechanisms. And in my worldview now, I separate knowledge of the mechanisms from experience and knowledge of the outcomes, right? Yeah. And I think our experience and knowledge of the outcomes of PEMF is way out in front of our real understanding of mechanisms. Yeah. That's my opinion. And these things are real. Like I was saying on the forum the other day, a guy was talking about, he felt all energized after he used PEMF. He wanted to know if it was charging him up sort of like a battery. And my opinion, and I could very well be wrong, but my sort of like, I certainly don't discount it, but I feel the same way. Yeah, me too. After I use PEMF, not as intensely as he does, but much more sense of well-being. But I attribute it to different, likely different mechanisms than charging you up. What it does is instead of charging you up, it prevents the thing that's been pulling you down, and therefore you feel like you're charging. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. And either way, it'd be really nice to know what it's doing, so that as a design engineer and a scientist, I can go in there and turn the knobs and make it even better, right? That's why I want to know the mechanisms. But knowing the mechanisms doesn't prove that it works. Yeah, it's different. It's you can prove that it works by seeing the outcome, and there's definite outcomes. But
I was planning on talking about something else, but I don't know how long we've been going.
I think we've been going about 45 minutes, so this is probably pretty good length. Maybe we can talk about something else in the next video. How's that sound?
That'd be good. I have a short couple of things we can talk about in the next video. So I guess we'll see you guys later.
All righty. Thanks a lot to everyone, and we'll see you later. Trying to keep the videos from being too long.